Hello and most welcome to 1564 of the Heidegger series. I will finish up the fourth session of Jacques Derrida's The Supplement of the Other, of Death, of Meaning, of Life, from 2020, put together 2020. And then continue with the first session, oddly enough. We are making a deconstruction of the text itself. We ended earlier on in 1557 and how Jacob is comparing typographer and his handling with text with the genetic transference of information. And one notable quote here is that Jacob says, "Some bacteria have another way of supplementing their genetic program." There is a supplement introduced here. And we also went through how Jacob adds the word real, véritable and véritablement, and the word real also acting as a supplement, adding to what is already said and claimed. And we're just into really her. I read a quote from Jacob. It's so good, so I will, with your permission, reread it. It's on page 93. After the first paragraph, there is a quote. Through recombination, the elements of genetic texts, genes from different individuals, can be reassorted in new combinations that sometimes offer advantages for reproduction. Even though sexuality is not really véritablement a method of reproduction for bacteria, which usually multiply by fission. It nevertheless allows the different genetic programs of the species to be mixed with the resultant appearance of a new genetic types. The question of the really is not simple, however. It does not go so far as to undermine our statistical knowledge regarding the frequency or the probability of sexualized reproduction in bacteria. Inasmuch as sexualized reproduction presupposes the transfer of something between two individuals. Something that in fact happens only rarely. Yet the question of the really does go so far as to challenge our determination of reproduction as asexual when it happens through fission with a single individual that relates to itself in order to divide itself and produce a copy. So that supplementarity is perhaps intervening already here. With this auto-reproductive auto-affection of the most immured bacterium. If one is to link sexuality to supernumerary supplementarity, as Jacob does in the following passage, where is one to locate a beginning for all of this? This is the question that will preoccupy us next time with regard to both sexual supplementarity and lethal or lethargious supplementarity. Here, as I had indicated earlier, are a few other occurrences of at least the word supernumerary supplement. This passage immediately follows the one I just read. This is from The Logic of Living, pages 292 to 93. Recombination only reassorts the genetic programs in populations. It does not add to them. Certain genetic elements are, however, transmitted from cell to cell and simply added to the genetic material already present. The instructions they contain are indispensable neither for the growth nor for reproduction that this supplement to the genetic text allows the cell to acquire new structures and perform new functions. It is an element of this type that determines sexual differentiation in certain species of bacteria, for instance. Furthermore, as it is not indispensable, the nucleic acid sequence contained in such supernumerary elements is not subject to the constraints of stability that natural selection exercises on the bacterial chromosome. These elements represent a free supplement for the cell. A sort of reserve of nucleic acid text that can vary freely over the course of generations. Two apparently opposed properties of living beings, stability and variability, are based on the very nature of the genetic text. At the level of the individual, the bacterial cell, one observes the recopying with extreme rigor of a program which prescribes not only the detailed plan of each molecular structure, but the means of executing the plan and of coordinating the activities of the structure. On the other hand, at the level of the bacterial population or of the species as a whole, the nucleic acid text appears to be perpetually disorganized by copying errors, by recombinational spoonerisms, by additions or omissions. In the end, the text is always rectified. But it is rectified neither by a mysterious will seeking to impose its design, nor by an environmentally determined reordering of a sequence. The nucleic acid message does not learn from experience. the message is rectified automatically by a process of selection exerted not on the genetic text itself, but on whole organisms, or rather populations of organisms, to eliminate any irregularity. The very concept of selection is inherent in the nature of living organisms, in the fact that they exist only to the extent that they reproduce themselves. Each new individual, which by mutation, recombination and addition becomes the carrier of a new program, is immediately put to the test of reproduction. If this organism is unable to reproduce itself, it disappears. If it is able to reproduce itself better and faster than its congeners, this advantage, however minor, immediately favors its multiplication and hence the propagation of this particular program. If in the long run the nucleic acid text seems to be molded by the environment, if the lessons of past experience are eventually written into it. This occurs in a roundabout way through success in reproduction. But only what exists reproduces itself. Selection operates not on possible living organisms, but existent ones. End of quote. Textuality, supplementarity, reproduction and selection. Those are the sites on the conceptual chain, on the same conceptual chain that we have yet to analyze and displace. The second point that I simply wanted to raise before concluding us back on this side of the sexual supplement this side of the kind of reproduction that Jacob determines as sexual. If we return not only to bacteria in the simplest asexual reproductive functioning, but also to the cell and to every chemical substance within the cell, it can be said that each chemical species is reproduced from one generation to the next as exactly identical to itself. But Jacob clarifies, each chemical species does not form copies of itself. A protein is not born of an identical protein. Proteins do not, therefore, reproduce themselves. They depend in their organization and in their reproduction on something else that reproduces itself spontaneously by producing a copy of itself. And that is deoxyribonucleic acid. It is the only element in the cell. It is the only element in the cell capable of reproducing itself by producing copies, says Jacob, of itself. Says Jacob, this power to produce copies of itself stems from the fact that this acid is made up of two chains, each of them double, and it is on the basis of this duplicity and the resulting internal duplication, that the first textualization is produced as reproducibility. What is the relationship between this duplicity and the supplementarity we just mentioned? Jacob does not speak here of supplementarity, for it is obviously not a question here of either death or sexuality. It is right here in this very primitive, monotonous and archaic place that we will take up next time all these questions, in particular the question of the texture model. So Jacob here managed to make an incredibly mechanic image of the sexual reproduction. Let's listen to this from his own book. At the level of the individual, one observes the recopying with extreme rigor of a program which prescribes not only the detailed plan of each molecular structure, but by means of executing the plan and of coordinating the activities of the structures. That is most definitely the essence of the essence. And it's interesting that this, written in the mid-80s, I would assume, is so, what his speech is from the mid-80s, is so pertinent today, where we are absolutely ruled by this strong determinism, I would say, in the strongest possible sense. Jacques Monod and Jacob, they lead up to Richard Dawkins and the idea of an even more fixated, if that's possible, determination. And the assumption coming from Newtonianism, listen to this, the nucleic acid message does not learn from experience. It doesn't have a memory. Obviously taking from a spinning jenny or some similar mechanical device. Or why not a wrench or a car? Assuming that of the DNA of the cell is preposterous, I would say. How do we know? You put a pause there and I'm going to do something with that whiteboard.